Static stretching gained a bad reputation a few years back, with people saying that you should never do static stretches before exercise, even that static stretches are bad for you. But a lot of research has been done since those original studies came out. And actually, the current research shows that that is not the case anymore. There's just specific things you've got to think about when you do them before workouts or in other conditions. So in this video, I'm going to first explain what static stretching is. Then we're going to look at how you can safely do them before workouts, how you can safely do them after workouts, and also the benefits of them and what they can't do. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Maryke. I'm one of the physiotherapists from sportsinjuryphysio.com, where you can get an online physiotherapy assessment of your injury and a rehab plan. Have a look at the description of this video if you want the link to our website. What is static stretching? Well, it's characterized by a long sustained hold. So you take the muscle into the end of its range, so as far as it will allow you to go, and you just sustain that position for several seconds. Now, the woman in the picture is doing a sustained stretch of her hamstring muscle in this case. So the difference between that and dynamic stretching is that with dynamic stretching, you move repetitively in and out of the position. So you're not really sustaining it for more than just a couple of seconds perhaps. Now, I've made a whole video about dynamic stretching and the benefits as well as the pitfalls of those. So have a look at the description of this video if you want a link to that video. Is static stretching bad for you? No, the research shows that's not the case. But it depends on how you do it. So the main mistakes that can lead to bad outcomes is if you hold a static stretch for too long, or you force it and you are too forceful with how you do it. So let's have a look at how can you do static stretches safely before a workout. Now, the main reason why people will tell you never to do static stretches before a workout is that some research several years ago showed that if you do static stretches before a workout, you can reduce your muscle strength and power for a period of time. But the problem is that that research, when you look at it, wasn't done in a way that is similar to how we do static stretches before a workout. In those studies, they held the stretches for at least 2 minutes at a time, and then they didn't allow people to move at all before they tested their strength. So it's no surprise that recently, when more and more studies were done that was similar to the way that athletes use stretches before a workout, they didn't show any effect on the muscle power and performance. So let's look at this. And by the way, all of these research studies are down in the description of this video, so have a look at them if you want to read them for yourself. So what's been found is if you look at doing stretches or static stretches before a workout, it can reduce your performance if you hold them for longer than 60 seconds and you don't follow it up with dynamic exercises. But if you hold a static stretch for a shorter period of time than 60 seconds, so typically we'll hold them for 30 seconds, and you use it as part of your complete warm-up, so you follow it up with dynamic movements and things like jogging, then it has no effect on performance and it can be beneficial. So it's all about how you do that. So how can you do it safely before a workout? I would suggest if you are going to hold them for maximum of 30 seconds. You can do a few repetitions, but then you have to follow them up with dynamic movements and a proper warm-up. And if you want to know what a proper warm-up is about, then have a look. We've made videos about those, and I'm putting the links to those videos in the description of this video as well. So how about stretching after workouts or kind of just as part of a normal day? Is that safe to do static stretching for? Well, again, it depends on how you do it. So you can actually give yourself an overstretch injury by being too forceful or holding it for too long or doing these stretches too often. And that's because our bodies, when you do stretch, you do put strain on different parts, and that's normal. It's like exercise. Exercise puts strain on different parts. So if you overdo that, you get injured. Now, there's strong evidence to show that overstretching can lead to injuries like high hamstring tendinopathy. Another example is your insertional Achilles tendinopathy. And usually when I speak to those patients and say, so what happened? What did you do? Then it's often that they were trying to get the splits in yoga, or they're doing lots of long stretches because they thought that was beneficial for them, or lots of calf stretches because they thought if their calves are more flexible, they'll be able to run better. So my advice here would be, if you're doing stretches to improve your flexibility or just as part of what you do after your sport, then again, there's no need for long sustained stretches. So maximum, I would say 60 seconds at a time, but 30 seconds repeated a few times is usually more than enough. When you do a static stretch, you're not pushing as hard as you can. You're taking that stretch to the first point where you feel the muscle is starting to give some resistance. And that's where you hold it. So you're not taking it to where you're starting to sweat or thinking, oh, that's now bordering on pain. That's too much, and if you do that too often, it can cause an injury. Now, I will make a video where I demonstrate the most common stretches for the legs as well as the upper body, and I'll put links to those videos in the description of this one as well. So let's look at the benefits of static stretching so that we can understand why you may want to put them into your your warm-up routine, or why you may want to put them into your cool-down routine. So if we look at the benefits, they have been shown, static stretching have been shown to be more effective than dynamic stretching at gaining range of motion. So if a large range of motion is important to you, then involving static stretches in your, or including static stretches in your workouts as well as your cool downs and day-to-day life may be beneficial for you. Then there's also some evidence that they can help to reduce acute muscle tears. Now, I know the evidence shows that they don't prevent overuse injuries, but there's a difference between acute injuries and overuse injuries. And there is some evidence that they can help prevent acute hamstring strains, for instance. Also, some sports do require you to be able to move in quite large ranges of motion. So, for instance, think about how wide Novak Djokovic can open his legs when he's lunging for a ball. Well, definitely in his first initial years that he played, lunging for a ball in tennis, or what a gymnast should be able to do. So there are certain sports that require a larger range of motion that often can only be reached through static stretching combined with other things. So in those cases, it may be useful to add it in as well. Now, you may be thinking that I'm just an office worker who sits and work all day. You know, I don't really want to be Djokovic. Well, if you're sitting in one position for a long period of time and you never move outside of that, you can end up with areas that stiffen the body or feels uncomfortable. And static stretching can give you that range of motion and it can make you feel more comfortable. What I will say is I do also find that the combination of static stretching plus dynamic stretching usually produces better results. So I won't often use static stretching on its own. I would usually combine it with other things as well. Okay, so let's look at some of the things that static stretching can't do. So the research shows that static stretching, if you do it after your workout, it has no effect on how much discomfort you feel the next day. So you know what DOMS is? DOMS is that feeling of, oh, my muscles are sore, I worked out really hard yesterday. Static stretching does not reduce that. It's mainly massage that does. So have a look. I've also made a video about DOMS in the past that may be useful if you suffer with that. The other thing is that, like I mentioned before, static stretching regularly does not prevent overuse injuries. So there's no reason to do that to try and prevent that. There are, in certain sports where you've got explosive things, it can help to reduce acute muscle injuries though. And then lastly, be really careful if you're injured. I would say do not do any static stretching during the early phases of injury, because usually muscle tears just get worse because you're now stretching something that's torn. And also things like tendon injuries, when they're sensitive, they usually just get worse when you stretch them and irritate them further. So if you're injured and you're thinking, oh, I want to stretch this because I can feel the injured parts affected when I stretch. I often get patients say, oh, but it feels so good when I stretch. It's like, yeah, but look at how it feels several hours later, because that's usually when it flares up then. So if you're not sure about whether you should be stretching for an injury or not, speak to your physio. They will be able to advise you. So if I had to summarize the recent advice from the research, I would say that static stretching before workout is not bad for you as long as you hold the stretches for less than 60 seconds. So 30 seconds is good. And you follow it up with dynamic movements and exercises. Your type of sport and the other aspects of just that's intrinsic to you will decide whether you need it or not. And then if we think of static stretching in other situations, it's important to not overstretch, so push too forceful or hold them for too long or do them way too often, because that can actually cause injuries. And then also, if you are injured, stretching often irritates it. So make sure you check with your physio before you do any stretches for your injury. Brilliant. Hope you found that useful. Let me know if you've got any questions. And remember, if you need more help with an injury, you're welcome to consult one of the team via video call. Link to our website is in the description of this video.